The People's Republic of China is in the middle of a program to expand and increase the capabilities of its armed forces. This expansion includes a rapid increase in the size and capability of its nuclear strategic forces. The increase in its nuclear arsenal coincides with Chinese rhetoric against geopolitical opponents that has become more aggressive and threatening. The expansion of its nuclear forces and this aggressive rhetoric have sparked concern and, in some cases, alarm among military and nuclear watch groups. These groups increasingly perceive the world as becoming less safe from a nuclear confrontation as Russia routinely threatens a nuclear war against Western allies of Ukraine. They also see Russia's close ally making a concerted effort to expand its nuclear force and move closer to parity with Russia and the United States. It is worth exploring the substantive reasons for China's nuclear ambitions. China detonated its first nuclear bomb at the Lop Nur test site in China's northwest on October 16, 1964, with a yield of 22 kilotons, roughly equivalent to the atomic bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki, Japan in August 1945. The Chinese program that created its nuclear bomb was nominally a homegrown program, but it greatly benefited from a joint partnership with the Soviet Union to develop China's nuclear capability. That program ended in July 1960, when the Soviet Union, in a disagreement with China, withdrew all of its technical assistance over deeper disputes between the two communist powers. However, the Soviet Union had provided enough equipment and technical assistance prior to 1960 that the Chinese technicians and scientists had a jump-start on how to create an atomic bomb on their own. China's long-time nuclear weapons policy was to provide a minimal nuclear deterrent, consisting of about 200 nuclear warheads and approximately 20 ICBM silos to provide long-range nuclear striking ability. China's economy grew to become the world's second largest, based on gross domestic product, and it began to assert itself more on the global stage as its economic power granted it a new stature. This economic superpower prowess prompted China to pursue increased military strength, which, when combined with its economic power, could potentially confer diplomatic power comparable to that of the United States. The Chinese view of the defense build-up landscape inevitably led to an increase in its nuclear forces. The first concern for China was that it has two rival nuclear powers, the United States and India, both of whom China regards suspiciously. China's relatively modest nuclear force of 200 warheads seemed insufficient to counter India's 170 and the United States' 3,750 warheads. So China viewed its insufficiently sized nuclear force as an insufficient deterrent. India and the US are also economic and regional rivals, and in China's opinion, its nuclear force is not sufficient for its stature. China is also apprehensive about the growing strength of the United States' anti-missile capabilities, predominantly concentrated in the western United States and directed towards Asia. The US rationalizes that missile defense is essential to counter the persistent nuclear threats originating from North Korea. As a result, the US is building a nuclear shield to defend against the relatively small number of launches that North Korea can initiate. The US defense system does not have the capability to intercept a larger number of missiles, as it would overload the designed system. The United States argues that this is why Russia and China have nothing to fear from the US anti-missile system. China, despite the US assurances that all indications from public testing of the system are true, has suspicions. The first concern is the establishment and operation of a missile radar in South Korea, which the US missile defense system intends to utilize. The US missile defense system will use this radar to track and intercept a North Korean missile launch against the United States and its territories, as well as Japan and South Korea. The issue for the Chinese is that the radar can also detect launches deep in China, so it would have the potential capability to assist in the interception of a Chinese missile launch. The Chinese are aware that the US system is improving and could potentially intercept dozens of missiles at once in the future. This could put China at risk if it maintains its small nuclear deterrent, which could potentially undermine its nuclear strategic capability. The Chinese also observe the global landscape, recognizing that possessing a substantial nuclear force would enhance their standing, and achieving nuclear parity with the United States would provide them with significant leverage. China observes that the West, under the leadership of the United States, is enacting policies that are hostile to China, due to what China views as the West's disregard for China's global standing. China believes that the only way to change this Western mindset is to increase the capacity of its nuclear arsenal to such an extent that the West will be forced to acknowledge China's military capability and adjust its policies accordingly. The result of this situation, China has started on a pathway to build its nuclear stockpile. Estimates for 2019 put its nuclear stockpile at 200 warheads, while estimates for 2022 put it at over 400. Estimates indicate that it will have 500 warheads by May 2023, 1,000 by 2030, and 1,500 by 2035. China is also increasing the number of ICBM silos and mobile ICBM launchers. It will be able to deliver more ICBMs than the United States, despite having less than half the warheads. The US is expected to continue to have a larger submarine and nuclear-capable aircraft to deliver more nuclear warheads than China. However, this only matters if the decisions are made to launch a general nuclear war and not use the capability to force change by the West in favor of China or face the prospect of a nuclear war. China is on a path to having the third largest nuclear force in the world, and with it the stature to be a peer with the US both economically and militarily, which is something the Soviet Union and Russia were never able to do to rival the US economic power. The prospect of a nuclear and economic rival to the United States has created outright concern in the West. The Chinese on the world stage have been aggressive, arrogant and unreasonable in their demands of their neighbors in the Indo-Pacific and even in Europe, as the European Union sees China as a threat. The concern is that if China continues its unlawful demands with no limiting principles, how far will it go to press the West to relent to its demands? Will this eventually lead to a nuclear showdown? Or will the West be willing to appease the Chinese to avoid a nuclear standoff? The drawback to the potential Chinese threats and actions, coupled with its having peer nuclear capability with Russia and the US, would lead to a potential nuclear arms race in the Indo-Pacific. This is due to potential questions about whether the US and West will not stand up to Chinese demands for fear of a nuclear standoff. Could this motivation prompt countries in the region to pursue their own nuclear capabilities, providing them with some safeguard in the event that the US withdraws its nuclear umbrella from the region? The only thing keeping Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand from becoming nuclear powers is their choice not to do so. If China were to be too aggressive and force a change of thought in the region, it could lead to a regional nuclear arms race. After the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States and the Soviet Union became less aggressive in nuclear policy, and perhaps this is something the Chinese should consider in both its statements and actions as it pursues peer nuclear capability. While a regional nuclear arms race is unlikely, given China's current actions in areas such as the South China Sea, Tibet, Hong Kong and Taiwan, would a country eventually be compelled to make such a decision?